Welcome to MMA Hot Seat. I'm your host, Ross O'Donnell. Over the last few shows, we've interviewed top UFC coaches, fighters, UFC analysts, and we've pretty much kept our focus on what happens inside the ring, inside the cage. Mixed martial arts training is not only for inside the cage. Today I thought we'd take a little bit of a turn and talk about how it's useful on the street. In light of some of the recent tragedies that we've seen in the news, I think it's an important aspect that people do understand that self-defense does come out of training for mixed martial arts. Today we have author of Who Is Your Teenage Daughter Afraid Of? Deb Maybury is with us today. Deb, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Ross. It's good to be here with you.
If we could start off, we've got a lot to talk about today. If we could start off, you just go back. I know you've been training in martial arts for about 20 years now. Can you tell us how you got started, how you got interested in it?
Sure. In some ways it seems like yesterday, really. It is actually 20 years in February. I had always been interested in martial arts. I saw the famous show Enter the Dragon, Bruce Lee, and I was 10 years old, and I'd always wanted to get involved in martial arts. And my brother took judo, and that just didn't do anything for me, being a female, and I don't think I liked that close proximity. Right. But I always wanted to do it, and finally I found myself in February, 20 years later, being 29 years old, and thinking if I don't try it, then I'll never have the opportunity to do it because I'll be too old, right? So I started to look into it, and lo and behold, that was 20 years ago, and I loved it. I've done a variety of different styles. And then I got involved in fitness, which is where I met you. So I mean, I've loved the journey. So
when you first started, what was the first art you actually started to practice?
Kung Fu. There was a place that's no longer called Energy Lakes, Kung Fu Studios. And I started there, and it was a pretty traditional style, some modern stuff, but mostly tradition, old school. It was some really tough training. The first couple years, like for yellow belt, it was a 3.5-hour long test. One-on-one with my teacher. Same thing with the self-defense portion of it. It was a lot of really rough grabbing and takedowns and hair pulls, really some nasty stuff. Right. And that test itself was 3.5 hours. So those two tests in that original style, with that original teacher, were some of the most difficult training that I actually ever did. So it really created a very good foundation. And not until black belt did I have that same type of really hard training.
Okay. And you've trained in other arts. What are some of the other arts you've trained in?
Well, I went from the Kung Fu to a karate, and that was, I had already trained for about 7 years, and I was going through a difficult time, and I just wanted to get away, some separation from the studio, but I still wanted the fitness component. So I went and I did karate, so I was there for about 18 months. And then I went and I did Wing Chun Kung Fu. Which was very traditional, and I actually had the opportunity to meet Grandmaster William Chung, who was a peer of Bruce Lee's. And I loved that training, but they tried to put me in a box and tell me what I could teach and not teach, and I had already created the style realistic self-defense for women at the time. So I didn't want to leave, but I had to leave because I wouldn't give up the teaching that I believed in, which is what I had created. So, and then I did some kickboxing, a little bit of boxing, did some grappling, jiu-jitsu, some eskrima, some stick stuff, and really sort of the gamut, always searching for what worked best. That was always my goal.
So you've got a fairly vast experience in different types of martial arts. Some work well. A lot of sports, or a lot of self-defense or martial arts training is focused on competition. Competition being drastically different from in a ring or on a mat as to what it's like on the street. So I know you've adapted your training very effectively. You're very well known, very well respected as a self-defense expert in the world. How did that come about for you that you wanted to adapt and create your own style?
Well, it was a very clear moment. I was in brown belt, and I had already been experimenting because I could pin a guy in a certain hold, and he couldn't get away. Now, he could get away, but not with the technique that we were given. So there would be some type of a release, and say he couldn't do the release, so then he would throw in a strike. So it worked both ways. I couldn't get away, they couldn't get away. So I started to experiment with little things like sticking a thumb into somebody's throat, or, you know, on the inside of the groin, or things like that, just to see what the reaction would be. But the defining moment was I was in brown belt, so 7, 8 years in. And there was this particular move that was a floor pin, which was, you could say it would be the right position, whatever, where the hands are above the shoulders. Right. And I was questioning, because you don't challenge typically in martial arts, I was questioning some of the moves that we were doing. And I also said, well, what if this was a female who had no training at all? Because at that point I was already kind of nasty. And what I did is I actually set up an instructor. So I asked a buddy of mine who was the biggest guy in the studio, tall, lots of weight. And he went on to, not the head instructor, because that would have just been bad, but a lower level, but instructor, a very good martial artist. And he pinned him, and I watched as he couldn't get out. And I knew at that moment that it was wrong to teach people that they could get out of certain moves in reality. And like you said, in a studio it's completely different. You do that, I do that, or I do that, and we spar, or we set up and we're doing, you know, like a point. If I hit your chest, I get a point. If I kick you in the head, I get a point. But it's not realistic, because fighting doesn't happen like that. So that moment was defining for me. And then there was another one while I was taking karate lessons. And we were sparring, which we did very seldom. It was almost all kata-based. So I was lined up with a black belt. And in the studio, they presented me with a brown belt, basically, to go in. This guy started to do some moves, and he was snapping at my chest. So he's hitting my breast. It's not a lot of fun to get hit like that. And it's not very, in my mind, realistic. Why is he wouldn't do that if he was fighting with a guy to get a point. So on the streets, it's ridiculous. It's not effective. But he kept doing it, and I said, you hit me there, I'm going into a different place on you, because you're not supposed to hit there, you're not supposed to do certain things. So the next time he came close, I just whacked, just kicked very, very close to the groin, just below, and he stands back, he says, you can't do that. And I said, I just did, and I'll do it again if you violate, you know, this space for me. So those two moments made me realize that there's so much that's taught and programmed into the people that are training martial arts that it's not going to be effective in a realistic situation. And I was asked to leave 2 studios, because I will train as long what you want in your system, but I'm not going to allow somebody to believe that it's going to be effective when I know that the majority of what is taught is not effective in a crazy, panicky, frightening, violent situation. It serves other purposes, don't get me wrong. Discipline, focus. If you're more fit, you have a better chance of getting away. But if you're being pinned, if somebody comes at you violently, I don't believe a lot of it will work. And I tested it, so I found that out with women.
Now, you touched upon it a bit. I know a staple of most martial arts training is forms, katas. And sparring, it's rules. I mean, it's a competition, and there are rules. You cannot strike to the throat. There's no strikes to the groin. There are many different things that you cannot do, which in real life, I've had this conversation with some other martial artists, there's no tapping out on the street. And there's no referee jumping in to say, point, after the person's been taken down. What is your thought, and again, not to in any way belittle katas or forms, what's your thought as a realistic self-defense instructor on teaching katas for people to believe that it's a self-defense method?
If you train anything at a high enough level, it will be effective. I want to make that really clear. Because I've done a lot of styles, I've had a lot of different teachers, and I respect them all in different ways. Even Tai Chi, taught in a slow form. But if you're actually applying some of the things in the right areas, I do believe that they will work. But in saying that, when you're training a kata, you're not training what your natural inclination is to do. So for example, today I was at a high school and I'm working with girls. And I'm trying to teach them to go from a natural reaction. So I had a whistle in my hand, plastic whistle, and I don't know where I just flipped it at a girl. Her reaction is to come up like this, block and deflect, and the girls beside her then react and they pull away. So I believe that every technique or move that you teach realistically has to come out of whatever that person, and it has to be individualized, will do naturally. Because they're going to do it naturally. If I all of a sudden lunge at you, your hands are going to come up. Okay, so we need to start here. These things are effective programming, but for self-defense, the person isn't going to do this. The person is going to react. The fear, the element of surprise, they're coming up. Wherever the person grabs, where hair grabs your wrist, your attention will go there. You're not automatically the first move going to go to something maybe you learned in the studio. So I think it's so important in self-defense to say, this is how we train in the studio, but then that's why I like MMA. Person grabs you, there's no do this, do that. It's like one guy will do this, one guy will do that, one gal will do that. And I think it's so important to say, you're a natural kicker.
Right.
So kick. You're natural. You want to punch. It maybe is not the most effective, but if you're going to punch, then turn your punch into a hammer on top of the nose. What is a woman's strength? What is the woman's weakness? What is the attacker's strength? The element of surprise that I refer to a lot. The size of the person. The average guy is 4 or 5 inches taller than the woman. He weighs 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds more. He has a tighter grip. He'll also run faster. So don't think he can hit once, hurt, and get away. You have to injure, and you have to hit certain parts of the body that you're not taught to hit in a kata or in some studios.
Now, and the element of fear, I mean, it's a very controlled, sure, you get a little nervous when you're sparring, everybody does, and if you don't get nervous, there's something wrong with you. You should be nervous when you're sparring, but it's not the same level. So what we want to get into with you is there's a different level here of nervousness, almost a fear, anxiety, panic state when there's an attack as opposed to a sparring. Can you just expand on that a bit for us?
Sure. In a studio, you're in a safe environment to begin with. I've never seen anybody come after anybody with a knife, a real knife, or a real gun, or 5 guys just absolutely attacking. It's all controlled somewhat. You make it as realistic as possible, but it's not. When you're surprised, your heart rate goes 100 miles an hour instantly. So if you're some fine little detail, something, you're going to lose it. Your memory is going to go flash, and that's why when I tested women that were actually, and I won't say the style, but in a specific style, I could see the look searching for something to do, and they couldn't remember the technique, or I did it slightly different. The panic here, you sweat, you shut down, your vision comes narrow, you probably don't hear. That's why they say a lot of bad guys end up getting shot by cops, because the cop says, put it down, and they kind of the fear.
Okay. We'll stop at that point there. We'll be back after this break with more with Deb Maybury, and we'll revisit this portion here.
Okay,
Thank you.
fabulous. Thanks.
Welcome back to MMA Hot Seat. Again, I'm joined with Deb Maybury. We left off talking about fear being an element that isn't always in a studio environment. Now, I know you've done lectures and different type of seminars in schools. Can you touch upon a bit of that, some of the questions that some of the young girls might be asking you?
Sure. I go into high schools, and then I also do seminars at businesses or whatnot, specifically focusing in on women. And actually, you mentioned fear, and the book, What is Your Teenage Daughter Afraid of, actually came out of 2 things. One is I found out that somebody that I knew at a local high school was actually arrested for sexually inappropriate behavior with the student at the school for 4 years.
Wow.
Started when she was in grade 9, he was 48, and then 4 years later. And then finally the mother found out that something was happening. So when I found out about that, I was quite shocked, and I just happened to be teaching at that school that week. So when I went over to the school, I asked the teachers, and she hadn't been in the phys ed stream, because that's where they bring me in, which is crazy, because there are so many girls that don't have the opportunity to get this. But there was one girl in the class that day that kept putting up her hand and saying, "Miss, I'm afraid of this. Miss, what if somebody breaks in the house and grabs a knife out of the drawer? Miss, what if somebody comes in my bedroom and jumps on me on the bed? Miss, and it was just a whole stream of questions. And I actually ended the class and said, sit down. We're going to talk about fear, your fears. So I spent the rest of the afternoon talking about that with them. What came out of it was a combination of her saying how many fears she had, or actually the class, and then that teacher who had been at that school turned into this book. So what I did was I asked about 9 teacher friends of mine or at schools that I taught at, to go in and ask the girls one question: what are you afraid of? So long story short, to get to your main question is, they're afraid of a number of things, and it shocked me how many things they're afraid of.
Right.
Besides the spiders and snakes,
Right.
the number one fear was being violated sexually, rape.
Right.
A number of other things that they were afraid of were strangers, particularly men. Right. So when you laugh and talk to a girl as she's passing by, you think you're being polite and funny, and she's probably afraid that you're watching her. Okay? They're afraid of the unknown, and it can be a whole list of unknowns. They're afraid of expectations from parents. The pressures that are put on them. By the time they're 17, they're supposed to decide what school they want to go to, what they're going to do for the balance of their lives. Right. So there are so many fears that come up. Right. I was quite shocked. And then when I teach them in the school, the two main things that they're afraid of is the fact that they won't be able to get away, no matter what I teach them, or what anybody else teaches them, and that there's going to be a weapon involved. Those are the two big fears that they have.
And you mentioned that they're afraid of strangers, but we know statistically most violations or attacks are actually by people who know you. You can touch upon that. I know you've done a lot of research in that area. Maybe you could tell viewers a little bit about that.
You're absolutely right, and that's the sad thing. In the book that I'm working on right now, I mean, on sexual abuse, 1 in 3 females, 1 in 5 to 7 boys, depending on the study, is sexually abused by the time they're 18. And the really sad thing about that is that the vast majority of the time, they will know the perpetrator. That can be in the family, within the family. Father, mother, mother, father, brother. I haven't heard of a sister, but oh yes, I actually did. Just marry, yes, sister, grandfather, every uncle, cousins, can be anybody. And then the next layer is your neighbor, your coach, your teacher, the priest, the scout leader. Right. So there's so many layers of that. Right. And what people don't realize is that they're so afraid of the stranger. And I always say, it's not the stranger you need to be afraid of. Right. It's the strange behavior that you need to be afraid of. Because we know each other. If I meet you on the street, I'll say, "Hey, Ross, how's it going? It's so nice to see you." And I can do this to you, and you're not going to go freak out.
No.
If I meet the camera gal on the street, we've met in this setting, and I go up to her and I say, "Hey, it's nice to meet you," and I start touching her and hold her hand a little bit longer, she's going to go, "This girl's a little strange."
It's a little uncomfortable.
Yes. And everybody has that, but what we do, and particularly with people that we know, is we allow it to go a little bit further, and a little bit further. And that's the grooming stage. Right. That's when somebody builds trust. And that's the sad thing, is because so many times when there's a sexual violation or inappropriate behavior, there's trust there. And those people never forget that. And it stays with them forever. So it is a sad reality that most of the time you know. Now there's about 20% of the time it's a stranger. Right. You get jumped somewhere, you make a mistake. You go somewhere you shouldn't have been. Even at a party, you make a poor judgment having something to drink. I mean, there's so many different factors in there.
Now, and you mentioned coaches. I mean, and the martial arts world is not immune to this. There's been many situations where martial artists have taken advantage of students as well. Now, to touch back upon that, even if you're taught martial arts and you're a black belt or you have substantial proficiency at self-defense, when you know the person, there's much less likelihood you're going to use that martial arts on them. And even if you do, you will probably not use it to the extent that you would to save your life. You're using it more almost maybe to have the person back off a bit. Maybe you can comment upon, even if you're highly trained in martial arts, when it happens, sometimes you just don't react the way you're supposed to, or I should say supposed to, but the way you feel you've been trained to. A lot of times people are trained in martial arts and they feel, okay, I've taken this, or even I've taken a couple self-defense seminars, wow, now I can handle myself. And the true answer to that is no, you can't. So if you could expound upon that for us.
It's tough because you can have the skills and you can know the sensitive areas of the body to attack. Let's use the eyes, for example. Okay, most martial arts, except for the ones with gloves on, there may be some eye contact. So if I'm teaching you to gouge somebody's eyes, for example, now all of a sudden that somebody in your family, your uncle or your cousin, surprises you and is going to violate you. It's hard to turn that switch into an animal state, which you have to do to attack this way, and to go after their eyes. So there's a difference in that when you know the person versus if that's a stranger. And I just taught the class today, and it's the same thing. Miss, I could never hit somebody's eyes like that.
Right.
I could never do that. And they'll say, well, that's fine, because now you're raped.
Yeah.
Or now you're killed, or now you're taken to a secondary location, and you're probably not coming back. And if somebody finds you, that'll just be lucky, you know? So I always try to layer it. If you're not prepared to do that, or in a situation you feel like you can't do that, so what can we do? We're on a date. Maybe we've parked somewhere and we've had a beer or something like that, and things get loose, and you know, we start kissing and stuff like that, and then I'm going, okay, that's my line. But all of a sudden it's not your line.
Right.
So that other person is now going to hurt me. But I still have this relationship, so just the thought of gouging their eyes or attempting to gouge their eyes may not be in what comes to mind that I want to do, but I want to separate myself. So what's the next thing that I could do? So maybe that's, okay, I'm sitting down, so I'm limited. What can I do? I can touch your face, so I can possibly injure or hurt your face. So maybe, you know, I could hammer on your nose or punch your nose or whatever comes to mind. But you have to be prepared to do something. There are studies that show that regardless of how you fight back, if you fight back, you're much more likely to get away than if you don't fight back.
Right.
For sure. And it's not just physical fighting though, right, Ross? Because there's two levels of that.
Right.
There's obviously the physical. Everybody knows I'm going to do this or that or whatever. Physically fighting, kicking, all these things. But there's another level that I call mental strategies. Physical techniques, mental strategies. The mental strategies are in that point. Could you say something to shift something in that person's mind? I really like you, but I can't because. I really like you, but. I really like you, but. If you do this, I'm going right to your parents.
Right.
I'm going right to your teacher. You know, I may want to do this, but just not right now because of. But if you do this, if you continue on, I will do this. Right? So negotiation. You may never go near that person again.
Right.
But they don't know that. So is there something that you could say? So this is when you know the person. If somebody grabs you on the street and they're really aggressive and violent, all of a sudden you're not going to say, listen, maybe not tonight, but maybe tomorrow night. Because it's not going to work. You have to be logical.
So training in martial arts, we've talked before about mixed martial arts is a very different breed from all the martial arts. I mean, it's full contact, and for the most part, I know maybe not intentional, but the intent is to knock that person out or disable that person. Training in mixed martial arts, would you find that to be a better avenue for the ladies rather than traditional martial arts for that reason? Given, and you got to still accept the fact that it's still a mental preparedness too. It's not just the physical, because we even have ladies at our club, they're getting very proficient at it, and the first thing when you try to have them spar, I don't want to hit someone. Yeah. So what's your thoughts on that?
That's a tough one with a lot of females. And it actually happens with guys too.
I shouldn't have said just ladies. We have guys too, they're getting proficient and they still don't want to hit someone they're sparring. So
that's right. The reason why I like the MMA is because it's probably one of the, there's another style I did too that was very close. You have to practice and play similar to the way it could happen in reality. And we know that MMA, as you take it up a notch, you are hitting.
Right.
What I say to females is this, and I do this when I go on training sessions. Okay, so you're not going to fight back for yourself. I get that. I get that. But it's not you that I'm coming after. And it's not you have to protect yourself for. Do you have any children? And if they have children, I won't say it on camera, but the things that I'll say about their child to stir that within them,
Right.
that's the energy where they have to draw from. A lot of fighters aren't drawing just because I want to beat you.
Right.
It's because I'm angry about something, and I tap into that.
When we come back, we'll talk about some of the strategies you have for perhaps not getting yourself into that situation or how to get out of the situation in your seminars. We'll be right back in a few moments.
Okay.
Welcome back to MMA Hot Seat. I'm your host, Ross O'Donnell. Again, I'm joined with Deb Maybury. We left off talking about how mixed martial artists seem to be able to draw that intensity, or they try to draw that intensity into a fight. Maybe you can expound on that a little more.
Sure. What I try to do when I teach, in particular the girls, is I try to draw the energy out of something in life that has happened. So today when I was questioned about what to do if there was a knife or a gun, maybe it could be, you know, at a bank, somebody comes in, or at a convenience store or wherever, and this comes up. So what I did was I referred to the example of what just happened in the States with the young children, which is awful, of course. And I said, not only do you have to think about fighting back aggressively, which you have to grab something that allows you to do that. Give yourself permission to fight back, damn it. Something bad happens, you're entitled to protect yourself. But you have to be creative too, because maybe you don't always want to fight back. If you just went limp like you were passing out, and then the person starts to say, take off your clothes, and then all of a sudden you attack in a certain way, you're going to surprise them. If all of a sudden you just pass out and go limp, you're probably going to surprise them. Okay? Now, I'm not talking about doing this if they attack you in your house and they're already on your bed kind of thing. But what I did today is think about how creative a couple of those people were in that situation in the States. And it cost a couple of them their lives. But there was a child that survived, one child out of a classroom, and that child was playing dead. But the child lived. There was a teacher that got the children to go in the closet. And then she said that all the children were, I believe, in the gym, something like that. But she was creative in that moment. Now, I don't know if either one of them had trained or planned for that. But that's one thing that I'm always saying. It's better to over-prepare. I don't want people to be paranoid and terrified by what I'm saying. But be prepared in case something does happen. And think about a scenario that could happen. And what I said to them is, okay, so we're lining up and we're doing this, and you don't necessarily want to do that to somebody that you know. But if somebody came into the gym right now and started shooting, what would you do? And they said, well, there's a lockdown. All the doors locked. I said, I don't want to be in a room where the doors are locked.
No, somebody's got a gun.
I want to be out of there. I said, are there windows? Could we have gone out the windows? Could we throw the chair and break the windows and get out? I don't want to be in lockdown waiting to see if somebody's coming through the door. So I think it's so important that everybody's different. Creatively, what can you come up with if you're thrown in a trunk? Creatively, what would you say if somebody was asking you out insistently over and over and over again and saying, if you love me, you would go out with me, or you hate me, you won't, you go out with them, and you feel guilty like you want to go.
Right.
What are you going to say? Because, it's a lot harder to get out of a relationship once you get into it than not get into it. So it's good to think about these things. What would I do if? What would I do if? What would I do if?
Now, I understand in the situation in the school you were teaching in, it shows you just what a small world this is. That actually one of the people in the classroom actually had a direct link to someone in that very unfortunate school mishap before Christmas. If you could tell us a little bit about that.
The book that I'm currently working on, Unlock the Door, what I did is I'm doing a series of interviews, and there's 34 in there, and it's getting to the stage where it's starting to wrap up, which is really exciting. But in doing that research, I wanted to make sure that I was okay, because I'm listening and interviewing people with all these stories, and I was sexually abused as a young child. So I wanted to make sure that Deb is still okay. So I went and I joined a group for sexual abuse. So this is where this happened. We were talking one evening, and a man came in who I'd connected with. We just got along really well. And he came in, and he looked like a ghost. And he sat down, and I thought, oh no, because he's been like this with his healing. It's been really, really, really severe for him. I waited because he was late getting in. I couldn't approach him. Immediately when he started to talk, he said that his cousin's son was killed in that school shooting. So it's a very small world, and you know, we've tried to put on female sessions up here sometimes, and we don't get the numbers, because what I've found is that if something hasn't happened to you, you're kind of afraid. You think if you get some training, maybe you're going to bring it on, right? The energy is going to come, which is completely ridiculous. The other thing is that because the numbers are so high that have had something happen to them, they're afraid to come and to revisit those memories. That happened in a session we did where I talked about a knife and a lady left, right? Yeah. But the thing is those memories don't go away. They're on you. You can't get rid of them. You almost have to learn how to embrace them. And part of doing that is to learning skills that then enable you and empower you. So that if something happened again to you or something to your child, then now you have some tools on how to deal with that and to heal and move beyond. And this is the thing with a lot of men too.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, something happens and you jam-pack it down, shame, blame, guilt. And we need to let that go. And you know, sexual abuse has been such a taboo in our society. And we need to talk about it. We never used to talk about breast cancer.
Right.
And now people are wearing the ribbons. So we need to come full circle on that one and help everybody involved, the families, even the perpetrators, you know, to put people in jail. Now there are some people, let me qualify this, there are some people that need to go in jail and never come out.
Right.
Absolutely. But if somebody has a thought about something, wouldn't it be advantageous to have a hotline where they can call and say, I'm thinking about this, and they have a support group, not unlike AA, right? So we really have to open up because there's so much of this going on. It's an epidemic, and we really have to collectively get together. That's why the book's about revealing, it's about connecting people. I have police officers, I have Dr. John DeMartini, who was in The Secret, behavioral specialist, he's in there, a lady in California who woke up one morning on a phone call, found out her husband was a pedophile. I mean, it's so vast, and we need to open it up and just and have a dialogue and talk about it. Most of the females, almost all the females that are in prison have been sexually abused as children. The majority of the men, same thing. But people that are abused, it's very rare that they become the perpetrators, but they become angry. They become alcoholics. They become addicted to drugs.
How about just drug addicts?
Drug addicts.
Let's go with that.
There we go. Thank you. They become depressed. They have anxiety. You know, so there's a whole bunch of things.
So in writing the book, you've basically put a part of yourself, your heart and soul is in the book. When you're writing this, are you including, and for the viewers in the book, are you going to include something in how to prevent these things? Are you going to talk about self-defense? Are you going to talk about taking some sort of martial arts training? Are you going to talk about trying to educate the public on the things to do and not to do in the book? I'm not trying to give away the book, but just kind of like a capsule of what you plan to put out there and deliver to the public.
Yeah. The book isn't a self-defense book.
Okay.
Because the majority of the people that were abused, it's child abuse. So I can teach all the skills in the world physically to a child, and the child doesn't have a hope, basically. Some of the strategies, yeah, if they feel uncomfortable with somebody in their family, they can go and tell the mom. If they feel uncomfortable at school with a teacher, they can go and tell the mom. If it's at home, they can now learn how to tell an uncle or somebody, right? But in the book, it's not self-defense. But what it is, it's people revealing the stories and then actually telling how they have started on a healing process. And there's also a lot of information of some options to go and find help after the fact. So, like I said, I mean, there's police officers that talk about, she talks about the internet, okay, Facebook and sites like this. There are a lot of predators on those sites, so you need like full safety up there, no identify stuff. You get kids that have their school names and all this type of thing. They have you don't never put your whole birth date on there. Everybody likes to get the birthday wishes, but don't have your year on there. That's setting you up for fraud. Okay, so there's so many different things like that, and each person in the book, or the majority of people in the book, will actually have something, a little lesson in there that people can learn from by reading it.
So it's kind of like a workbook for them as well, so they can work through it and kind of plan their life or plan some sort of self-defense strategies or escape strategies, something like that.
Well, it's mostly healing,
Right.
healing strategies. I mean, there'll be stories. I mean, the majority of people all in the book knew the people,
Right.
and they were younger. There's one where there's a 20-year-old man,
Right.
and you'd never think he was like that. It devastated him.
Right.
For the last 6 years, he's still trying to cope and understand what happened, and he went into really bad drug addiction and alcohol to try to suppress the feelings, and you can't suppress them. What you suppress is coming right back at you, right? But what he did was he got a coaching position, so it was with a hockey league. He got a coaching position. The guy came over to get his certification. He overpowered him, and he did the ultimate to him.
Did you find any of the people that you did interview had any sort of martial arts training or self-defense training, or were they pretty much your regular citizen?
Pretty much the regular type of person. Like I said, the majority of the people in the book were children when it happened. But the thing is that they don't even have the skills to verbalize, to tell the person to stop or this is wrong. They haven't been taught that. And I'm just trying to, I don't believe there was anybody. There are some people that then something else happened to them when they were older, but they were simply overpowered. So it's a tough one because there's such a difference in the strength in the stories that I'm looking up because I'm searching to try to find somebody, but there wasn't anybody that said I had this skill and I was able to fight off the person. There was only one young man. He'd had several things happen to him. Actually, wherever his family moved, something happened. He felt he had a sign on his head. But when he got to be 12 or 13, he had so much anger inside of him that the next time it did happen, that he unleashed the anger to that person.
Okay, well, what I'd like to do is, whether you have martial arts training or not, I know you provide seminars that are self-defense seminars. I'm sure some people do have some martial arts training, some don't. So when we come back from this break, if we could go through basically the itinerary of a seminar to give them an idea of what you teach and maybe a few tips on how not to be put in those situations or what they can do, whether they do or do not have some training.
Sure.
So we're all good with that. We'll be back in just a minute with more with Deb Maybury.
Okay.
Welcome back to MMA Hot Seat. We're with Deb Maybury talking about self-defense. Deb is a self-defense expert. I know you do seminars, and you usually break them into personal safety, home safety, and car safety. Maybe if you could give the viewers some tips on personal safety to start with.
Sure. The seminars are always, again, the physical, which goes without saying, and then the mental strategies, which I feel are so important. Because if you don't have to use the physical techniques, that's where you want to be, because as you know, you get into the ring, you don't know what's going to happen with somebody who's really aggressive.
So you're in home. What's the first thing you might give somebody as a tip?
Okay, so first of all, let's say you're actually not in your home. Let's say you're going into your home.
Okay.
The intent is to go in your home. And this is very good for children as well. They come home and a door is ajar or glass is broken, screen is cut open. If you're in an apartment, the door is ajar. There's something different. Don't go in, right? Everybody now has a cell phone. If you don't, you go to the neighbor or to the corner store and call somebody else that may possibly, like call home, see if anybody else is home. And then, of course, if they're home, you feel comfortable going in.
So unless you're in a teen horror movie, you don't actually go into the basement and look for them.
That's right.
Okay, good.
Anything you see in a horror movie, you probably don't want to do. You don't go looking for the bad guy.
Note
and that's
yourself.
the same. That's the same thing. So you're in your home and you start to hear noises, like somebody's breaking in. Do you want to go and look? Not necessarily.
Right.
Right? I always say err on the side of asking for help. And that's the same thing if you're walking down the street. So if you're in your home and you hear something, glass break or something like that, if you're with somebody, you can collectively get out of the house or go to the outside of the house and see if something has happened. Most people are going to disregard what I say, and they're going to go to that area of the house in the basement and see if something is going on. I just don't believe in doing that. Some other things about your home safety, obviously locks. And making sure that your house is locked. I played a joke on a friend one time who consistently left their door wide open. So I knew they were in the basement, and I walked straight in, didn't knock, and terrified them by surprising them. It's so easy. First of all, a burglar will get into your home no matter what you do to your home if they really want in. Just like somebody will violate you, they'll find you if they really want to. Okay? So within your home with locks, I always say, for example, if you're home alone and you have a shower, lock the door. Can somebody break into that door? Absolutely. But the element of surprise if you hear. If you have a chain lock, your kids have gone away to school, particularly daughters. They just have a simple little lock in residence. Anybody can get into it. Or they don't lock it. You always lock it. Put a chain lock on there. Because if they forget to lock it, or they think it's locked, they can visually see that that chain lock is there. Can they break through that? Absolutely. Will you hear it? Absolutely. I'll never forget being at a seminar one time and a woman saying that she wished she'd had some of the training that we were receiving. Because she woke up one night, she didn't hear anything, and all of a sudden, there was a big, strong guy on top of her. And she said there was nothing I could do. And you come from a state of sleep to now being fully alert and comprehending what's going on. So locks are very important to use them. The same thing with window locks. If you have a sliding lock, just stick a ruler in there, and you don't want it open any more than the size of the head coming through or something like that. So there are different things like that around your house. Obviously, the number one thing that keeps somebody out of your house is a dog, or the perceived threat of a dog, which could be a sign, could be a leash at your back door, could be a dish, a dog dish outside, that type of thing.
And what are some signs, like some people are kind of, I should say, setting themselves up. But for instance, we run a club, and we call some members and things like that, and on their voice machine, it'll be, "Hi, it's Mary," and then two kids speak up.
Yeah.
Good idea, bad idea? To me, that says there's one woman living alone with two children.
Yeah, it's a really bad idea.
Suggestions?
Really bad idea.
Suggestions? Have a generic message?
Have a generic, or have whoever the man is in the house leave the message, and if there isn't a man, then have a man's voice on there. Or say, "Hi, this is Mary. My husband's not home.
Right.
The family's not home," but you really don't want to identify who's in the house either. It's better to me to have a generic message on there. I know I have, one of my sisters has it on, and she spells out her name, the kids' names, and I just don't think it's a good idea at all.
Put yourself in harm's way, basically.
If somebody is looking, then
they'll be looking for that clue or that tip.
Exactly.
So now we have a young lady who's in her early 20s. She's going to her car after shopping. What should she be looking for? What are some signs that somebody's watching her, or how can she keep herself without putting herself in an awkward position?
Okay, so the number one thing here and in every situation is awareness. Being aware of your surroundings. That means that, particularly if it's dark out, or if you're in an area you're not familiar with or comfortable in, if there's only like a couple people standing over there that make you feel uncomfortable. The cell phone, the attention, this, and this. The awareness is down. Now, if you're walking into a situation, you have a cell phone, get it on, get it to your head, get your head up, and tell whoever's on there, I'm afraid, I'm in this location, I'm getting into the car. So when you come out, the awareness, look around. Again, you're not paranoid, but you're just aware, and then you also don't look like a target. Okay? So as you approach your car, which, if it's at night, should be parked close to the door that you can get. Now, everybody wants that one. If you can't get that one, get it under a light. If you can't get that one, don't park between two big trucks. You want to be visible and seen.
Back in, so you can drive straight out?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one too. But most young people these days don't know how to back in.
Fair enough.
But that's a good one. The other thing is when you get in your car, do it with purpose. Get into the car, lock the car door, and as you're coming out of the mall, you should already have the key in your hand or the button to get in. Get in the car, lock the door. Before you get in the car, let me step back. Look around, make sure there's nobody in the car. Okay? Get in the car, turn it on, and drive. Don't get in the car, sit there, shuffle with some papers. I played a joke. I'm nasty this way. One lady told me one time that she was only taking training because her boyfriend was there. And she said, he could always protect me. Well, he's not with her 90% of the time. She went down, sat in her car, rolled down her window, it was summertime, and started playing with something over here. I went out after her and came around the corner and just did that to her chest. You can imagine her reaction. After that, she got it.
Right.
Get in the car, lock the door,
Right,
turn the
right.
ignition, and separate yourself from the area.
Okay. So let's take it to the one step further. So now someone has actually put themselves in a position where it's clear they're going to attack you. What are you going to do? What is the best thing to do? I mean, I'm sure not being there is the best thing to do, but
Yeah.
say it's inevitable, you're in a hallway or you're in an area where you can't readily escape. What are they going to do? What's their best means of escape or attack or defense?
Well, it's really frightening. It's hard to answer that unless I know
It's kind of
exactly
a loaded question, I know that.
where it
Yeah.
is. Because this is not the only thing I have to protect myself. If somebody came in the door right now and just came attacking at me, I would jump up and I would put you in front of me to begin with. Or I would...
Thank you very much.
Or, no, and I've done it in a testing situation. I went over and grabbed the instructor and said, here.
Yeah.
And the people were trying to, you got to be creative, right?
do, yeah.
What is available? There's a camera here. There's a cup on that table.
Yeah.
I would be grabbing for whatever I can and whipping it at you.
So basically everything is a weapon that you get your hands on to defend
Everybody's
yourself.
a weapon. Everybody's a weapon.
Right.
It depends the level. Also, the intent of the person. If I think somehow I can say something, which again I don't want to say on camera.
Right.
If I can say something, offer them something, or if I know the person, again in a dating situation, is threaten something, I have to be thinking, what are all my tools to use? Can I separate myself? If somebody comes into the bank and there's going to be a robbery, is there a back door? Do I know there's a back door? Can I get out? Convenience store. Is there a back door? Will I try to get out? Can I grab something and start throwing it at somebody? I had a kid say today, well, yeah, but what if you miss? So what? If I throw something, there's going to be some type of a reaction. And it's better to run zigzag from a gun than stand there and just be shot. So, I mean, what to do? Vocalize, scream. If you're in an apartment, fire, fire, fire.
Right.
As opposed to help because people
Right.
don't want to get involved.
Right.
Right?
Good point. Good point.
If you're you know, a mom and your son now is at the age he doesn't want to go into the washroom at Wonderland alone, you stand at the door and you tell him, vocalize if something happens. Right? Smash the door. Somebody grabs your mouth, you still have your hands. Somebody grabs your hands, you have your mouth, you have your feet. What is available to use at that particular time? If somebody takes you down in a park, is there gravel? Can you throw gravel? Can you
Right.
throw sand? There's always, not always, but there's often something that you can use to, you know, to use above and beyond just what you have on your person.
Last question, I'm going to put you right on the spot here. To survive an attack, martial arts trained, self-defense trained. Your thoughts? They're two different things.
It's tough. If you have martial arts and you have a really high skill, and I don't mean a belt, I couldn't care less because there are people that can't protect themselves. I know somebody, I trained with somebody who was a second-degree black belt, and when I grabbed them in a particular way, they froze. Okay? Because it's kata-based.
Right.
Right? Martial arts is always good because it builds character, and you're probably less likely to get grabbed. But it can be bad too because you have the confidence then that you can do something, so you put yourself at a party and you take a drink, you have an extra drink. Maybe you're drugged. I had a friend who was drugged with a drink at a party, a work party where she knew everybody. So it's so hard to say whether you've been trained or not trained. You have to make wise decisions and not get yourself into bad situations, knowing that most of the time you'll know the person. You'll be on a date. If somebody wants to isolate you on a date all the time, let's be alone, let's be alone, let's be alone, there's something going on there. They want something. Okay, so you really...
Basically what you're saying is black belt or no black belt, stay out of the situation and you won't have to use anything.
And if you have to use it, you commit, you go 100% and you become an animal. You become an animal. And everything that an animal will do to protect itself, you need to be prepared to do that. Not even just for yourself, but for your family and friends.
Well, Deb, thanks very much. It's been very interesting. We appreciate you coming on the show, and thank you again very much. If you have any questions for future MMA Hot Seat shows, please email them to info@Fitness Kickboxing Canada. We'd be pleased to ask them on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ross.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.